We expect our team to be able to do that, or our environment to be able to do that. And what I want you to just be open to is knowing that sometimes we need to take baby steps up that ladder of the emotional vibrational scale. Hello, welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today's going to be a great day. I have had just a great week, and I hope you have too. And I hope that you're looking forward to the rest of the week if you're listening to this podcast during the week or the weekend coming up. You know, every day has the possibility of being a great day, and I hope that that stirs in you some hope and optimism. And if not, if you're finding yourself kind of not really excited or like you don't have a lot of eagerness for what's to come, then today's episode's for you because, you know, one of the things that has always been an important part of discovering happiness is understanding our emotions. And not really feeling great is an emotion. And actually feeling nothing is an emotion too. Haha. I had this really interesting conversation with a patient of mine the other day, and she said, you know, it's so interesting because for a long time, I really wasn't able to feel happy. You know, I couldn't find joy or optimism or hope in anything. I'd have these great things that I was looking forward or that I should be looking forward to, and they just kind of felt numb. Or I would put things on them that made them feel less exciting. She said, you know, I even used to remember playing this game with myself when I was younger, that I would introduce reasons why I shouldn't be excited about something because I would just be disappointed. Interesting. Has that ever happened to you? I wonder. Have you ever been so excited about something or felt excitement and thought, oop, don't get excited. Don't get excited. Or maybe you've heard yourself say that. You know, my mom has just been buying a house and everything's gone through. It's wonderful. They're finally homeowners here in Maine. I'm so excited that she moved up into Maine with us. But I remember her saying to me, you know, we don't want to get too excited about it. And it's so interesting that not only can we suppress our emotions that don't feel so comfortable, sometimes we suppress the excitement and the joyful moments too, because maybe in the past you've been excited about something and then let down, or something was disappointing you. You had such great expectations, and then when something didn't come through exactly as you hoped it would, boom, you felt some negative emotions or what you assigned negativity to. And what I'd love for us to imagine today is, what if there was nothing like a negative or a positive emotion? What if it just was emotion? And what if we allowed ourselves to experience the full range of emotions as human beings? I mean, isn't that what we're here for anyways? Isn't that what this human experience is all about? Is experiencing emotion, right? You know, we tend to avoid things that are uncomfortable. Makes sense, right? Uncomfortable things are not fun to experience, so we avoid them. But we also know that when we avoid uncomfortable things, we deny ourselves the really great things at the same time. Let's talk about that in the lens of emotions for a moment. If you're constantly practicing not feeling anger, not feeling rejection, if you begin to get that little hint of rejection, we push it down. We think, no. And that's actually called emotional bypassing, by the way. That's a psychological term called emotional bypassing. When we avoid feeling the quote unquote uncomfortable emotions and we bounce back up into the higher emotions. That's what we call toxic positivity. That's where that term came from, toxic positivity. It's when we try to make light of everything and create happy feelings all the time and avoid feeling the feelings that we don't love to feel or that are uncomfortable to feel. But we also know from research that in order to feel those really high highs, we have to allow ourselves to walk through the uncomfortable feelings. We have to allow ourselves to experience sadness, when someone passes, when something is lost, when we have a disappointment, when we don't have the outcome that we were hopeful for, it's important to feel that sadness. It's important to allow your body to experience what sadness feels like. This is why we've swung so far from the toxicity that maybe we experienced in our childhoods or our parents experienced in theirs, where we were told, don't cry, don't feel, it's going to be okay. Don't experience this emotion. And maybe we're taught as children that we shouldn't be crying. We should always be looking at the optimistic side. We should always be pushing through those emotions and just showing up anyway. But really experiencing them is so important. And what's so fascinating is when you experience an emotion, you realize you don't get stuck there. I think that's an interesting concern that we have is if I really allow myself to feel angry about the situation, will I become an angry person? And that's a fearful thing for many of us because maybe we experienced an angry person in our past and that felt unsafe when someone was angry towards us. And so maybe we avoid that because that immediately anger equals fear, equals unsafety, right? Well, the truth is when you experience or you allow yourself to feel anger, you process through it and you come out on the other side. It's almost like crying. Right? And many people avoid crying too, but I've come to love crying. I cry all the time. I allow myself to cry at the drop of a hat. My daughter is mortified because she hates being with me in public places when I burst into tears. We went to see Hamilton the other day. I've seen that show on TV so many times. I've listened to the soundtrack. I almost know every word because my kids are obsessed with it. And yet we watched it live, the live performance, the first time I'd ever seen it in Boston. I bawled my eyes out. I cried. I allow myself to cry and experience those emotions. I let myself feel the feelings because I know when I let myself feel feelings that are maybe uncomfortable, I allow myself to feel the really wonderful ones too. And it's also important to recognize that we can't just shoot from depression and hopelessness to boom, happiness and fulfillment and glory, joy, peace. That is too much of a leap. That is too much of a leap. I'd love for you to have access to this beautiful emotional vibrational scale that I've created. It's a really nice graphic. And if you're listening to this as you're driving, or if you're watching this on the YouTube, I want you to know that you can have access to this emotional vibrational scale in its graphic form, because seeing it, I'm going to walk us through it during this podcast, but seeing it really gives you a great impression of what I'm talking about. So if you text emotion, the word emotion, to 207-600-2699. So area code 207 Maine 600-2699. That's 207-600-2699. And just text the word emotion, just that one word in the text. That's the only way the system works, by the way. I'll send you to your phone immediately that emotional vibrational scale, and you can see it for yourself. But I'll walk us through it here on this episode and kind of explain to you about how it works in terms of walking up and down the emotional vibrational scale. When I first learned about the emotional vibrational scale many years ago, it blew my mind because it helped me really understand my children better, my patients better, my team and my husband better, and myself better. And so I think we can use this emotional vibrational scale in many ways in our lives. And so don't be freaked out by the word vibration. I think it's important for us in the medical and dental world to start embracing this idea that we actually have an energetic resonance about us within our bodies and that extends beyond our bodies. This is science, people. I don't know why we've avoided facing this in medicine and dentistry for so long, but we literally have a vibration about us, an energetic vibration about us all the time. So an example of this would be if you've ever walked into the room and someone is just taking up all the space in the room is one way to say it. Or, their energy is just palpable. They're so vibrant. These words that I'm using sound silly, but you know what I'm talking about when I say that person who you walk in the room and man, their energy is just big. And then you also know what it feels like to be in the space of someone who's very low and depressed. Maybe you've noticed that in one of your patients where there's just a heaviness about them and a sadness about them that's palpable. They don't even need to speak. They don't even need to share what they're feeling, and you can feel it off of them. That's their energetic vibration. That's what you're picking up on. That's your intuition and your human ability. It's the sense that we have, just like our five senses. We have a way to sense each other's energetic vibration. So when you see this emotional vibrational scale, that's what the vibration is referring to. But on today's episode, I'm not going to go too deep into energetic vibration, although I love to, and I would love to take you there on another episode. What I'm really talking about is just understanding emotion. That's enough for us, right? Sometimes we haven't even allowed ourselves to feel anything for decades. We just keep showing up. Show up. In fact, maybe we've told our team members, I've said this before on the podcast too, leave your emotions at the door. I mean, how unrealistic is that as a human being? How unrealistic is that for us to ask our team members to leave their emotions at the door? We need to start recognizing that we are human beings here. We need to start loving that about ourselves. We need to start loving our emotions. That's how we find greater happiness, is allowing ourselves to experience these things. So let me walk you through emotional vibrational scale to help you understand the levels of emotions and then how we can support ourselves in feeling better. Really, our emotional states are only two. I know there's many different emotions that we can feel. That, you can feel happy, you can feel sad, you can feel frustrated, you can feel angry, you can feel hopeful. We can go on all day listing emotions. And maybe sometimes the words you think, is that really an emotion? Is that a noun or a verb? What is emotion? Don't worry about it for now. Let's just acknowledge that there are many different feelings you can feel, and there's millions of nuances between. But really, they fall into two categories, two states, either empowering or disempowering. That's it. Name any or think of an emotion right now. It's either empowering or disempowering. That's it. So an example is anger. Okay, anger is disempowering. Anger doesn't make you feel empowered. It makes you feel disempowered. Hope, empowering, makes you feel wonderful. Fear, disempowering. Loneliness, disempowering. Acceptance, peace, faith, encouraged. Like all these words are all empowering states. So if you're thinking about it, definitely text me. I'm going to say that number again, just in case you didn't hear it earlier. 207-600-2699. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can even pause and I'll send it to you. And you can keep following along. But it definitely shows you those emotions and where they fall into the emotional vibrational scale. And then what you'll notice on the graphic is we have the disempowering states, and then we have the empowering states, and there's a state of neutrality right in the middle. Okay. So if you're not looking at the graphic, I'm describing it to you. It's like a linear scale up and down. And on the very bottom are the lowest disempowering states. And on the very top are the highest, most empowering states. So at the very bottom is absolute depression and hopelessness. Okay. And then we climb on the emotions. We kind of stretch them out. What I've done is I've actually organized them for you up, 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 more and more empowering until we get to a state of neutrality. And then we jump up into the most empowering states, all the way up to love, joy, passion, freedom, the most wonderful feelings. So if you can just picture that in your mind's eye, this kind of ladder of emotions. What we think is when we're down low, maybe we're in despair, which is really one of the lowest, deepest, most disempowering states, most disempowering emotions. What we think is, I just want to feel good. I just want to feel happy. I just want to get up to happy. But actually, happy is one of the highest empowering states. So making that leap from down, 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 all the way up to happy is so hard to do. And yet we have that expectation of ourselves. I mean, I had that expectation of my kids. And if I think about it, I've even had that expectation of my patients in the past, where I just want to be like, hey, cut it out, right? Get up here with me. I'm living up here in the happy place. Come on up here with me. And we think that we can do that in an instant. In fact, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as practitioners and business owners that we expect our team to be able to do that, or our environment to be able to do that. And what I want you to just be open to is knowing that sometimes we need to take baby steps up that ladder of the emotional vibrational scale. Hey guys, I'm interrupting your podcast episode to let you know about an incredible new program that I am launching in January of 2023. It is specifically for practitioners in medicine and dentistry to help you rediscover happiness and inner fulfillment within your profession and your life. I remember what it was like for me when years ago I was so depressed and anxious and feeling like I had created and built a treadmill I just couldn't get off of, pushing through every day and wishing my life away. This program is the how of how to find happiness in your practice and in your life, because we know that when we feel good, that's when we can do good. Check out thebizofhappiness.com/radical happiness, or click the link in the show notes. I cannot wait to see you there. So imagine for a moment despair and disempowerment living on the very bottom. And if you imagine yourself in that space of despair and disempowerment, I mean, I think we've all been there at various times in our lives. Feel that anger actually felt better. If you could get to a place of anger, there was actually a little bit more ownership, empowerment around that emotion, right? Doesn't anger feel like I deserve better than disempowerment, despair? Disempowerment, despair almost speaks to like complete victimization and giving up, like almost suicidal ideation. Whereas anger feels like, wait a minute, I'm entitled to a little more. I mean, I got angry with myself the other day. I was like, all right, cut this out, Tarryn. You have been on this this victim chain for too long. Get up, Tarryn. Man, I started getting a little angry with myself. And that anger actually fueled me. In fact, anger is what fuels revolutions. Here we are, we get so scared of anger, but anger can be an enormously useful emotion. It's what gets people to take action. Still disempowering, don't get me wrong. Living a life in anger does not feel good. And we know examples in our lives of people like that, right? That is not a place we want to live in or dwell in for long. But man, anger feels a little bit better. So now maybe do you see your patients a little bit differently, right? Maybe that angry patient is feeling just a little bit step up on the emotional vibrational scale from complete disempowerment and hopelessness. I mean, look, especially in dentistry, we're in a very fearful place. I mean, most of our patients are coming to us with trauma, dental trauma, and history of trauma. And if they're not, that's a scary thing to open your mouth. It's so vulnerable. It's uncomfortable to allow someone into your space that close. Especially within the past few years, we've been keeping people at a distance. Now we're diving into their mouths. If we're seeing anger in our patients, that is an amazing step up from the place of sadness or grief or disempowerment or hopelessness they've just been in. Or if the fear, that palpable fear that they've been feeling, if they're a little bit angry, maybe recognize that they're finding a little bit more empowerment feeling there. Okay, so now let's talk about the next step up, going up to worry and pessimism and irritation. Okay, irritation feels much better than anger. I'm just irritated. Now we see how we're crawling up that scale. The next step up is something like loneliness or disappointment or rejection. Man, I can just be disappointed. That feels a lot better than frustration. Feels a lot better than anger. I'm just disappointed. And then the next step up from disappointment is neutrality. Okay. I don't feel happy. I don't feel sad. I don't feel angry. I don't feel mad. I don't feel encouraged. I don't feel rejected. I just kind of am living here in this place of neutrality. And that's kind of okay. But notice how all along the way, it's been okay to walk up those steps. And it's almost unrealistic to imagine jumping from hopelessness to anything above neutrality. We almost have to give ourselves a little bit of grace to allow ourselves to crawl up that scale, to allow the people in our world to crawl up that scale. So above neutrality on this emotional vibrational scale, you'll notice the next thing is hopefulness, acceptance, encouragement. Now we're getting into the empowering states above that neutral zone. Empowered states. Now I'm beginning to feel it. I remember during COVID, during the lockdown, I remember the shift when we went from, oh my gosh, feeling so victimized by what was happening and so scared, and then a little bit angry and being angry at the CDC and angry at the government and angry at the ruling bodies. Like that felt better than being in the fear, in the terrible grief and hopelessness. And like we had no control, right? Do you remember feeling that anger? And then do you remember a point where it's almost like the social media videos and memes and posts on social media changed to hope? I remember those videos from Italy where they're singing on the porches or their balconies, or when we started seeing people going back out into the streets, hope started arising. It was almost like this shift in the global emotional vibrations, which was like, okay, we're all coming to this new place of there's hope around the corner. And it's almost like from that point, from that moment that hope started to be sparked, there was an acceleration to coming back to normal life. And then we started jumping emotions in the emotional vibrational scale. We went back up to eagerness and confidence and being inspired. That's when businesses started taking off, when new inspiration and ingenuity started happening. Because once we get above that neutral zone and we get into the empowering states, it's almost like you can get into a place of flow where you can start flowing up to these higher, greater feeling states. I got excited just talking about it. Maybe you can even hear it in my voice. Now do you feel that energetic resonance? You can imagine that in yourself. Maybe you're even feeling it in yourself. Maybe you've noticed as we're going through this podcast episode, when I was talking about those really low vibrational states, disempowering states, maybe you felt it in your body. Maybe you felt that heaviness when I was reminding you of hopelessness, when I was reminding you of moments of despair, when I was reminding you, and then a little bit of anger, resentment, that you can feel in your body. We know where that lies. You can even ask yourself, like, where does anger sit? And maybe as I'm even talking about anger, you're picturing something or someone that you're angry about right now. Like we know where that lies, and you can feel that energy in your body. And then when I start bringing you up to disappointment and loneliness and insecurity and just doubt, do you feel how much lighter doubt, insecurity, disappointment feels? That's just a step below neutrality. And then just let your body sit in neutrality just for a moment. Just take a deep breath right here. Just be neutral with me. Let's just sit in neutral and feel the peace of it. And as we sit in that neutral space, you almost feel yourself bubble up. It's like bubbles in a glass. It's like those bubbly drinks, you can almost feel yourself rising up. It's hard to stay in neutrality, isn't it? It's hard to stay in no feeling at all because we immediately feel a little bit of like, okay, I can accept this. This is feeling hopeful. I'm feeling a little lighter, right? That lighter feeling. And we can almost imagine ourselves like effervescently bubbling up to the surface as we step up to the next layer, which is worthiness, lightheartedness. And this is where the power of levity is so phenomenal. I love using levity to bring us out of lower disempowering states. And isn't that what we do in the office? Isn't that exactly what we do? I mean, I don't know how many of you have used this tool with your patients, but over and over and over again, I hear practitioners saying, oh, I use jokes. I tell them a silly dad joke, or we have these puns in our office, or we have games in our office. We have competitions you can enter into. This is lightheartedness. We're now 2 whole steps above neutrality. Lightheartedness helps us in a gentle way, encourage us out of those places, those lower emotional vibrational spaces. That's why it works. That's why we have fun days with our team. We need to help and encourage walking them up that emotional vibrational scale. And lightheartedness, silliness is so much more accessible than super empowered passion, joy, love. Sometimes people have a hard time getting there. And if you have a hard time getting there, give yourself some grace. It's okay. It's totally acceptable as a human being to have challenge with feeling those really empowered, high emotions. And, it's interesting. I get this a lot, is people sometimes think that I'm fake. And I'm just calling it out right now. I've had friends tell me this. Say, Tarryn, when I first met you, I thought you were putting it on. I thought you were faking it. Like you seemed ridiculously happy all the time. And I think that's our fear stepping in is, can anyone actually live in those higher vibrational places? And the answer is yes, I can, I do. And I didn't always. I most definitely didn't always live here. I've had very, very low places in my life. And it's actually the lowest place in my life after my brother passed, after my brother took his life in 2016, when I lived for an entire year in absolutely the lowest disempowering states. I couldn't even feel anger. For an entire year, I couldn't crawl out of that very lowest space. And I remembered what it was like to be happy. I actually remember saying to myself, I will never be happy again. I remember thinking that. And I remember clearly the day when I absolutely refused to tolerate that anymore. And I started crawling up that scale. And even in that language, you can hear me say, when I refused to tolerate victimization and hopelessness and depression, do you hear the anger in that? That was the beginning of my journey up this scale. And do I head down there? Oh, yes, I do. It happens. And remember, that's what I said. We have to allow ourselves to feel the anger. We have to allow ourselves to feel the sadness and the shame and the depression. Just for a moment, let ourselves walk through those human emotions, because when we try to stuff them down, we try to avoid feeling them, that's when we feel trapped. And that's also when we block ourselves from feeling these really great, wonderful emotions. I want to just tell you about above lighthearted. I just want to get to these last 3 in this episode. And so thank you so much for hanging in there with me with this episode. And please, I highly encourage you to get the emotional vibrational scale. Just looking at it gives you understanding. Just especially if you've listened to this episode, just seeing the graphic of it gives you so much insight into the people around you and into yourself. And I'll leave the link for where to text in the show notes. So if you've missed it, I'll give it here one more time, 207-600-2699. But if you've missed it, I'll leave it in the show notes and you can access it that way, and I'll text it to you. But above lighthearted comes confidence, responsibility, and open-heartedness. Ooh, we know that feeling. We know the feeling of closed-heartedness. So now know that there's an emotional state of open-heartedness, and it's so empowering. It feels vulnerable. I hear you, but man, is it empowering. And it's interesting how, as we talk about these higher emotional states, fear and resistance steps in because they feel vulnerable, right? Happy, courageous, grateful is the next space. And gratitude is another one, like levity. Gratitude helps pull us up out of those lower vibrational emotional states. So gratitude is one of the tools I use, and we talk about it on the podcast, and I know you probably have a gratitude practice of your own, but it's an amazing one. Of course, it doesn't work. It's really one of the second highest emotional states in this scale. So can we ask someone who's depressed and angry to be grateful? No, it's way too much of a leap. It's way too much of a leap. They need to take baby steps. Now, the good news is, if you practice this, if you understand the vibrational scale, if you do daily practices to support your empowering states, then it is possible to leap at leaps and bounds of the scale. And I'm living evidence of it. I practice this every day, and that's why it allows me to make those jumps as quickly as I can. But not if you haven't become skilled at it and practiced it over and over and understood it at a deeper level. I think that one of the most important components is giving this room in your heart and in your head to make sense. Because when you allow for understanding of your emotions, it changes your life. It can be a directional compass. It can allow you to understand your intuition, understand your higher calling, and understand your fears. Even understand where your fears are stepping in and not allowing you to live the life of your dreams. This emotional vibrational scale is really the crux of getting to a life of enormous happiness. When we understand, we're talking about reaching for emotion anyway. So we got to understand how emotions work. So this is just the beginning of understanding, getting an idea of where our emotions live on this emotional vibrational scale. And then, as I said, there's so much more science beyond like how we're energetically resonating these emotions, how our frequency is showing up with us all day long and impacting not just the people we're interacting with, but attracting things to us. So if we're living in low-level disempowering states, those are the things we're attracting. We're like a magnet. Low-level disempowering states, we attract friends who are low-level and disempowering. High-level empowering states, when we're living in this beautiful zone, suddenly relationships that are not congruent with that begin to fall away. And we start actually attracting people in the same space. Even patients. It's true. It's really true. We start attracting people who are resonating at the same frequency as we are. So exciting. I love talking about this. And actually, this is another aspect of radical happiness for practitioners. So if this is totally calling to you and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I need to understand more and need to know how to incorporate this in my business, in my work, in my healthcare providership of the incredible people in my world, then I would love you to consider radical happiness for practitioners. I'm so proud of this incredible work. I'm so proud of this course. I'm so proud of the incredible people who are going through the course and seeing major change in their lives and in their practice as well. So if that is of interest to you, I'll leave that in the show notes, the link to Radical Happiness for Practitioners. And always welcome to check me out online at www.thebizofhappiness.com. And thank you. I'm always so honored and humbled by the people who listen to this incredible information on this podcast. I just am so grateful to you. I'm so grateful that there are people like you out there who are willing to think outside the box, who are willing to reach for happiness in medicine and dentistry. I honor you and thank you. Thank you for not giving up on your dreams. Thank you for not just going through your life in a blinded way and ignoring how you feel and just thinking that this is the way it should be, that you've built this treadmill that you have to run on and that there isn't another option of living the life of your dreams. Thank you for acknowledging that and for being open to learning how to create a life of your dreams, because it's possible. And remember, when you feel good, when you're living in those empowering states, that's when you can do good. Bye-bye.